between Saudi Arabia and Israel, working together on a common enemy, which is Iran. And the president also spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday. Again, the president hearing from Macron that moving the embassy is not a good idea. Macron reaffirming that the status of Jerusalem must be resolved through peace negotiations between Israelis and the Palestinians. So just about everything, Sandra, that the president has heard about moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem carries with it a substantial negative. But I'm told that the president will tomorrow in a speech say that he wants to make the move and begin the process of doing that. And in announcing a move of the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the president would de facto be declaring Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, which no doubt will be met with a lot of protest, particularly in the Middle East. Sandra?
And the president will be, as you said, making a statement on that decision possibly tomorrow. And the president also hosted several Republican senators, John, for a working lunch today on tax reform. How did that go?
Yeah, this was something that was arranged by Colorado Senator Cory Gardner and Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander. They had a group of senators who wanted to meet with the president on several issues, including trade and tax reform. Lindsey Graham was one of them. And take a look at this picture, because was this an uncomfortable scene or what? Arizona Senator Jeff Flake seated right beside the president there. And we know that the president, there's no love lost between Flake and the president on any particular issue. But the president suggesting that everybody's got to work together to get tax reform through. Listen here.
The taxes we're so thrilled about, so popular, and I think something is going to be coming out of conference pretty quickly as opposed to long term. I think it's going to go pretty quickly. We're all on the same page. There's a great spirit in the Republican Party like I've never seen before.
But again, one of those uncomfortable lunches. The president also weighing in for the first time on camera on his endorsement of Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore. He weighed in on Twitter yesterday, telephoned Moore from Air Force One. The president reiterating that as far as he sees it, cannot afford to have a liberal Democrat taking the Senate seat in Alabama, because that person would be aligned. He actually said have his strings pulled by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. So the president, the Republican National Committee, now all in on Roy Moore for next Tuesday's special election. But what happens after that is an open question, Sandra, that a lot of people here are floating various ideas about.
We do not know yet. At least, John Roberts, thank you.
Thank you.
Busy afternoon. Congressman John Conyers ending his career today as another woman comes forward with allegations of sexual misconduct. Conyers announcing his retirement amid growing pressure from his colleagues to resign. Peter Doocy live on Capitol Hill for us. Who does Conyers think should replace him, Peter?
Sandra, he's endorsing his son, John Conyers III, but John III is not the only person in the family tree trying to retain the seat. The congressman's grandson, Ian Conyers, also says he wants to run, as his grandfather, John Conyers Jr., who's been in the House for 53 years, makes clear he's not resigning, he is retiring.
I think there should be a complete disclosure and revealing to all of the citizens of the country of what your federal legislators are doing or not doing.
Many Democrats are saying today this is a good move. It's what they've been calling for ever since allegations of sexual misconduct started coming to the surface. But others in the Democratic conference are wistful.
This is a sad end to a long career, but I hope that we will not forget what he has contributed to our country, which is phenomenal.
Since the Conyers retirement is effective immediately, we do not expect to see him here anytime soon. Sandra.
Peter, what kind of progress are Republicans making on tax reform at this point?
Sandra, the House tax bill and the Senate tax bill are still different, but because Republicans in the House have already voted to go to a conference where they can streamline their version with the Senate version to send something to the president, Republicans over in the upper chamber are very optimistic.
Yeah, there are a few rough edges in it, as you know, but we'll get it all worked out in conference. We made a lot of changes on the Senate side in anticipation of conference.
But that conference still hasn't officially been agreed to by the Senate, and so the top Democrat over there, Chuck Schumer, is out today saying it's not too late to say no.
As the two houses of Congress prepare to go to conference, I suggest my Republican colleagues reconsider their efforts and think again on how much better of a product we could produce through a bipartisan, open, and transparent process.
Lawmakers are also working hard today to avert a government shutdown come Friday night, and they just delayed a key meeting that was going to be talking about this 2-week-long continuing resolution until one day closer to Friday. The meeting is supposed to be now tomorrow, so a lot going on over here in the House.
Fair to say there's a lot of drama right now. Peter Doocy, thank you. Well, that very important deadline coming Friday. House Republicans are considering a stopgap spending bill to keep the lights on through December 22nd. But conservatives want to extend that deadline until after Christmas. Our next guest tweeting, when the choice becomes pass the funding bill we give you or stay in Washington over Christmas, how does that produce a good result? How does that produce honest debate? It doesn't. North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows is chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and he was the author of that tweet. What sort of response are you getting to that, Congressman?
Well, I think the American people, Sandra, are tired of us kicking the can down the road. We've known that December 8th, when the funding, our current funding, expires, has been the date on the calendar for almost 3 months, and yet we have not taken up an appropriations bill. The Senate has not acted on the House bill that we passed. And so just to add another 2 weeks and have it come due with a crisis right before Christmas where people start worrying about a shutdown is not the appropriate thing to do. So a number of my colleagues have said, if we're going to do this and have more time to negotiate, let's make it a little bit longer, fund our military, make sure that we have the anomalies that need to go into funding our military properly taken care of. But let's go ahead and give ourselves some time to debate, or if not, let's go ahead and have the fight this week. You know, there's nothing that 2 weeks is going to buy us that makes this a better thing for the American taxpayer.
You know, Congressman, you use that word fight, and that's interesting because when we look back at the frenzy we saw on the House floor last night, some unexpected drama. Love to get your thoughts on that. And I know you stepped aside to take a phone call from the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan was there. You took a phone call from the president. What do you say to those? Politico wrote it this morning that this underscores the divisions within the GOP over this spending strategy this month. What do you say to those who say, why are you attacking inside the tent? Why is there so much fighting within your own party when you've got Democrats like Nancy Pelosi calling this tax bill Armageddon?
Well, I can tell you that the debate is really not over the tax bill. I was on the Senate side earlier this morning working with some of my Senate colleagues to hopefully start to reconcile some of those differences. Obviously, the president has been fully engaged. He wants this process on his desk, you know, the tax bill on his desk in days, not weeks. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. So the differences are not necessarily in the tax reform bill, although there are very big differences. We've got to make sure that New York and California, New Jersey and Maryland are fixed with regards to their state and local. We need to make sure that those small business pass-throughs, that they get the same advantages of some of the others that this particular bill would protect right now, and making sure that all Americans pay less taxes, not more. And so those are fundamental differences that we have to underscore. But it really comes down to, are we as a Republican party going to be the party of higher spending and higher deficits and continuing to do that? I would suggest that we shouldn't be and we can't be. And so most of this is over tactical decisions, not necessarily fundamentally disagreement on the facts.
But do your efforts on funding the government and the debate over that, does that derail the efforts behind overhauling the tax code for your party?
Not at all. In fact, I've been somebody that's been out front on the tax reform package side of this for many weeks, as you well know. Have had a couple of conversations with the administration, certainly multiple conversations with our leadership. It's all about making sure that we get it right. I'm very optimistic that the president will sign something into law cutting taxes for Americans by December 21st. And yet we have to get it right for everybody.
And I mentioned last night How are things going after last night? I only have a few seconds left, but that was unexpected.
You know, they're going well. Obviously, we've had a number of discussions. In fact, I'm leaving right now to go have a meeting with the Speaker and the Whip and the leader, and we're having a good family discussion. We're going to get this resolved sooner than later.
Okay. All right. Congressman Mark Meadows, good to have you on this afternoon.
Great to be with you.
House Freedom Caucus Chairman. All right. It is a busy week. New details on the FBI agent dismissed from the special counsel's investigation over anti-Trump messages. What we are now learning about his work on the Clinton email investigation. And we're following a bombshell announcement from the Olympic Committee. The country banned from the Winter Games in February. The International Olympic Committee banning Russia from the upcoming Winter Olympics in South Korea. The move is the result of what officials say is Russia's systemic state-supported doping of its athletes. Numerous Russian athletes have been stripped of their Olympic medals in recent years due to failed drug tests. The IOC will allow some Russian athletes to compete, but not represent their country. There's new information on the Russia investigation. The Justice Department saying the special counsel's probe has already cost about $6.7 million in the first 4 months of Robert Mueller's investigation. That price tag comes amid controversy surrounding a former member of Mueller's team. FBI agent Peter Strzok fired after sending anti-Trump messages. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington, has been following this story closely for us. Catherine, we're hearing that Strzok was involved into the Clinton email investigation. What do we know?
That's right, Sandra. As part of our ongoing reporting on the Clinton email case, our investigative team reviewed this FBI summary of her July 2nd, 2016 interview, and it shows that the same FBI agent Peter Strzok was there in a formal capacity. The FBI summary reads in part, present for the interview were Clinton's attorneys David E. Kendall, Catherine M. Turner, Cheryl D. Mills, Heather Samuelson, and redacted. Also present was FBI Section Chief Peter P. Strzok. The same FBI agent changed Comey's earlier draft about Clinton's use of an unsecured personal server exclusively for government business, and he changed the wording from grossly negligent to extremely careless. And that's a significant change because this term gross negligence mirrors the standard under the federal statute, a criminal statute, 18 U.S.C. 793F, and that would be a criminal violation. He is also the same agent who oversaw the review of Clinton aide Huma Abedin's emails. You remember they were found on her estranged husband's computer and caused the FBI to reopen the criminal investigation just 10 days before the election. Separately, Fox News also confirms today that FBI Director Christopher Wray, appointed by President Trump, sent a bureau-wide email to boost morale late yesterday after the president said the bureau was in tatters. Wray writes he is inspired by the professionalism and dedication of agents, and he hints, he may well speak to these issues during public testimony on Thursday this week. Sandra.
Catherine, there's new information that the Trump transition team knew Mike Flynn was in regular contact with the Russian ambassador before the inauguration. What can you tell us about that?
Well, emails provided to special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe and also obtained by Fox News show the Trump transition team knew former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn was in regular contact with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak before the inauguration. Records available to us suggest Flynn did not disclose the extent of his conversations about sanctions, and that's what he pled guilty to at the end of last week with the FBI. This could really track with White House explanations about why Flynn was fired, even though the Trump administration's position has been under renewed scrutiny since Flynn's guilty plea last week. In one email from January 13th, Flynn writes, "I'm trying to establish a relationship, but yes, there were multiple calls," a reference to the Russian ambassador. The last one last year was on 29 December to discuss a post-inauguration call between the two leaders. Nothing was agreed to. Now, the records that we reviewed, of course, are not all of the records, but in the records, Flynn talks about these calls being condolences to the Russians after a military jet went down in December of last year. He also talks about inviting them to a Syria conference about peace and ISIS, but the word sanctions is not even mentioned in the interviews, in the emails, rather. So it may be there, but at least from what we reviewed, it certainly was not.
Catherine Herridge, as always, thank you for your reporting.
You're welcome.
Mass evacuations in Southern California as winds clocked at more than 60 miles an hour spread a dangerous wildfire north of Los Angeles.
You really don't think about when it happens to you, and what do you pack in that moment? I'm like throwing shoes and things that don't really matter, and I just wanted to get out of the house, so we just left basically with just the clothes on our back.
Fox News alert on a massive wildfire threatening homes north of Los Angeles. California Governor Brown declaring a state of emergency in Ventura County after what started as a brush fire has now spread to cover nearly 45,000 acres, destroying at least 150 structures, including a psychiatric hospital. About 27,000 people under mandatory evacuation as fire officials warn that powerful winds could push flames further into communities there. Jonathan Hunt is live from Ventura, California. What is it like out there right now, Jonathan?
Sandra.
Sounds like we don't have a...
right now is absolutely apocalyptic. I'm standing in one small area in the hills above Ventura City where this fire came through.
If you can bear with us, hopefully we get him back in here.
5 of these homes completely destroyed, Sandra. It is an incredible scene as you look around. These homes just burned to the ground. Beautiful homes overlooking the Pacific Ocean from their vantage point up high above Ventura City. Everything gone. We brought one couple, Bob and Cindy Zana, back to their house. It is the only one in this particular circle that survived. Their son stayed here all night battling the flames himself. He was throwing buckets of water on the flames from out of his jacuzzi, and he was able to save their home. But across this city, dozens upon dozens of homes have been destroyed. The official figure we're hearing in terms of homes and other buildings right now is 150, but I would not be at all surprised when we get the next update from fire officials to see that go much higher. The winds are a major issue. They have been so strong up here and the smoke so thick that firefighters have not been able to get any aircraft, either fixed wing or helicopters into the air to fight the flames, so that it is still a real struggle for them, and we are going to see more structures, more homes burn before this is out. And the forecast is that these kind of winds are going to persist right through to Thursday. So it is going to be a terrible fight, not just here in Ventura, but we're now getting more and more fires breaking out across Southern California. The Creek Fire north of downtown LA now put a fire around 5,000 acres. This one, as you mentioned, 45,000 acres and still burning, Sandra.
All right, Jonathan Hunt, some unbelievable pictures coming out of there. One of your first words to describe it, apocalyptic. Meanwhile, we are waiting at any moment now, possibly to hear from President Trump. He's been meeting with American business owners and their families. A lunch with American business owners and their families, a military family and business owner there, commenting to the president, but talking about tax reform and negotiations, of which we are currently in. Let's bring in Michael Meehan, president and CEO at Squared Communications, and Jason Johnson, former chief strategist for the Ted Cruz campaign. As you could see, the president there listening in to families. What do you need? I'll open it up to you. The president's working hard to sell this and get this done by the end of the year. Who wants to start?
Well, it's a tough sell, right? 30% popularity for this bill. It passed by a razor-thin margin in the Senate. 80% of the benefits go to the top 1%. It's hard to sell it to the middle class because it's hard to find a middle-class family that will actually benefit from what's been proposed by the two sides. And so there's a lot of work to be done if he's going to attempt to sell this to the middle class.
Jason, there's still a lot of work to do. We just spoke with Mark Meadows, chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. There's an aggressive agenda here. You've got the budget deadline, funding the government deadline by the end of this week, tax reform, trying to get that to the president's desk by the end of the year. Is this all going to get done?
Well, let's hope so. They certainly have their plates full. And with regard to the tax plan, there is a lot of selling left to be done. I wouldn't necessarily assume those poll numbers that were quoted are necessarily fully informed, because with everything that's occurred in the last month, ironically enough, the tax bill and the details of it haven't been at the front of the lead of the news But I do believe they'll get it done at the end of the day. They don't have a choice but to get the budget deal done. It may actually happen on Christmas Eve. I think they'll be working really hard right up until the deadline.
All right. Well, Michael and Jason, we've also got this news today. The longest serving member of Congress is now retiring in the wake of sexual misconduct allegations against him. Congressman John Conyers made his announcement this morning on a Detroit radio show.
I am retiring today, and I want everyone to know how much I appreciate the support, the incredible, undiminished support I've received across the years.
So, Michael, I'll start with you first. Conyers making that long-awaited, some said they saw it coming miles away, but certainly a turning point was Nancy Pelosi. Sort of walking back her earlier comments about him saying it's time.
Well, I mean, clearly he settled the case with a former staffer, and too many other women came forward with similar complaints, and so this seems to be the appropriate course of action. Him stepping aside seems to make sense given the credible claims that were made against him.
Jason?
Well, it makes sense for him to step aside. First and foremost, think about this. The year that he was elected, the first year that he was elected was the same year that a Dallas jury found Jack Ruby guilty of killing Lee Harvey Oswald. Right? He's the longest serving member of Congress. It is time for him to move on. But with regard to the allegations, I listened to his interview today. He did not admit to any wrongdoing. He did not cite that as the reason that he is stepping aside. And in doing so, he also endorsed, I believe it was his son, to take his place.
Yep.
And then I heard right afterwards that another member of his family is going to run against his son.
Right. So
pretty interesting.
So you're talking about John Conyers III, his son, and then you're talking about his nephew separately.
Correct.
We have this Jerry Nadler, the Democrat from New York, making a statement on his resignation today, saying there can be no tolerance for behavior that subjects women to the kind of conduct that has been alleged. The strength women have shown in coming forward to tell their stories is part of our country's progress in moving toward a place of greater respect, tolerance, understanding, and justice for all. Michael, you wonder if this is one of those moments and a big change for our country.
Oh, clearly it's a big change for our country, and it's long overdue. This is not about left versus right. This is right versus wrong. If people in the workplace have been harassed, people should be held accountable for it. There's no question about it.
And I want to move on to Roy Moore. We're getting ever so close to that special election, Alabama Senate race. Roy Moore, I want you to listen first. American Family Radio. Let's listen to this.
What they've done to me is not only unforgivable, it's just pure hatred, and it's pure spite, and it's pure evil and wrong. Once this political season is over next Tuesday, it'll be gone. Nothing will ever be said about it.
So we'll see what happens. But, Jason, what do you think of the RNC now throwing their support back behind Roy Moore?
Well, I suppose one could argue they didn't have a choice. I believe I saw someone quoted earlier today that the RNC is the political arm of the president. The president did, in fact, endorse Roy Moore, and as such, the RNC came in. Look, this is a runoff election for a special election, and special elections, as we know, are always about turnout. The RNC coming in at the last minute, putting money out there, I suspect will be used for a get-out-the-vote effort. I can't imagine that there's a single voter on either side in the state of Alabama that was going to vote for Roy Moore and then heard these allegations and decided they were voting for the Democrat or vice versa. This will be a game of turnout, and there's no doubt that the president's endorsement and the RNC's involvement will boost turnout for Roy Moore next week.
All right, Michael and Jason, thank you. A lot happening this afternoon. Good to have both of you here. Arguments are wrapping up at the Supreme Court in a major case at issue whether a business owner has the right to refuse to serve a gay couple on religious grounds. Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood, Colorado, citing freedom of religion for his decision to refuse to design a wedding cake for a gay couple. But the couple, Charlie Craig and David Mullins, call it discrimination. Shannon Bream joins us from the Supreme Court with more on this. Good afternoon, Shannon.
Hi, Sandra. It was a very heated argument this morning inside these walls behind me. The 9 justices bantering with the 4 different attorneys who were arguing the case. And it was essentially one of those hot benches where essentially they didn't let anybody actually answer a question because they were jumping in, talking all over each other. It was one of the more spirited arguments we've had here in a while. And there's a lot at stake because, as you mentioned, this is something that pits the religious freedom of this Colorado baker who says he's a Christian. He's done things throughout his business like turn away other events that he finds objectionable. Things he doesn't want to be involved with. He closes on Sundays so people can go to their houses of worship. And that is contrasted to the gay couple who came to him in July of 2012 and said, listen, we want you to make a cake for our wedding. He said, I'll make you or allow you to buy anything that's ready made in here. But as an artist or somebody who would create something specifically for your event, I can't do that for a same-sex wedding. Well, David Mullins, who's one member of the couple, they were here for arguments today. Here's what he said. He said, it's not about a cake.
This isn't about a cake. This has never been about a cake. And this isn't about weddings. It has never been about weddings. No, this is about freedom. Freedom for LGBT people to live full lives in public and not in constant fear that they will be denied basic service in businesses, fired from their jobs, or lose their homes just for who they are.
Now, supporters of Jack Phillips, he's the baker in this case, say none of that will be at issue. They say this is simply about allowing someone with deep religious convictions to be able to turn away business if they view themselves as an artist and they don't want to use their skills or have to create something that endorses an idea that they don't believe in. Jack Phillips has had a really tough time. He's had to shut down 40% of his business because he doesn't do wedding cakes at all. Now, after having been ordered by the state of Colorado, that he's going to have to do cakes for everybody. If he does them for straight couples, he's got to do them for same-sex couples or anybody else who wants them. Here's what he said after the arguments today.
It's hard to believe that the government is forcing me to choose between providing for my family and employees and violating my relationship with God. That is not freedom. That is not tolerance.
And really, Sandra, there was no middle ground. We had hundreds, if not thousands, of protesters here today, and they're very firmly entrenched on their opposite sides.
You know, Shannon, we started our day with you in the 9 o'clock hour in America's Newsroom, and it was a completely different scene. It's quieted down, obviously, now, but you had quite a crowd out there.
We did, and there was a lot of sound and fury this morning and a lot of passion on both sides. But what happens now is the quiet work that happens behind these doors when they go in and they have an initial vote on the case, and then they may spend months, arguing and negotiating back and forth before we finally get a ruling. You know, everybody is looking at Justice Anthony Kennedy. He's off in the swing vote. It certainly seemed like that's the case today. It was very tough on both sides, had really probing questions for both of them. But at one point, when attorneys for the state of Colorado who were saying this law under which Jack Phillips, the baker, got into trouble should be upheld, he went on to say this. He said, tolerance is essential in a free society, and tolerance is most meaningful when it's mutual. It seems to me that the state in its position here has been neither tolerant nor respectful of Mr. Phillips' religious beliefs. Now, we don't know if he's trolling us. We don't want to read the tea leaves too tightly on this because, as I said, the justice was tough on both sides, but he's got a long record of being very supportive of LGBT rights and talking about the dignity of every person. It seemed like here, too, he was also worried about the dignity of this baker. So how he decides this case ultimately probably will be how this 5-4 likely decision comes down. It's due by June, Sandra.
All right, Shannon Bream, thank you. Well, the Supreme Court making another big decision, handing a victory to the Trump White House on its travel ban. So how could it affect our national security and dealings overseas? Retired 4-star General Jack Keane joins us. Plus, we're awaiting the start of the White House press briefing, as we often do this time of the day. We will take you there live as soon as that. Well, the Trump administration celebrating a Supreme Court victory on its travel ban. The justices allowing the ban to go into effect while the legal battle continues in the lower courts. And joining me now is retired General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News military analyst. And I'm always honored to get your take on things. General, good of you to be here. I know you've had a busy day. But start out first, this is not a final ruling, but the Supreme Court today making news, fully enforcing this travel ban of President Trump's. How does this change things?
Well, first of all, I think it makes compelling sense. I've never been able to buy into why the legal challenges that were after this were upheld. It made no sense to me. It seems a president who has all the information available to him, intelligence, can make decisions about how to protect the American people. It is the #1 job a president has. And when you look at these countries that are involved here, he hasn't banned majority Muslim countries all over the world. He's taken countries that, #1, will not help us with identity of people. #2, we have problems with those countries themselves and their cooperation with us. Or #3, they actually have a terrorist present in those countries. So I think it has always made sense.
So is this a solution or a step? What kind of impact will this have?